Let's be real for a second. We are all swimming, no, drowning in this endless sea of information, opinions, and constant hot takes. It feels like a full-time job just trying to figure out what's real and what's just noise. So how do we do it? How do we cut through all of that and learn to communicate with real credibility? Well, that's exactly what we're going to tackle today. So, here's our game plan. We're going to start by decoding what bias really is. Then, we'll dive into the big showdown, objective versus subjective information. After that, we'll get practical with a toolkit for writing with crystal clarity. And finally, we'll talk about why this skill is, no joke, more important right now than ever before. All right, first up, let's talk about a word that gets thrown around all the time and can pretty much shut down any conversation: bias. But what if I told you we've been thinking about it all wrong? You hear this question a lot, right? And it can feel, well, kind of hopeless. If everything has a slant, how can we possibly trust anything? But the answer is actually way more complex and honestly way more interesting than just a simple yes or no. I love this insight from psychology professor Jennifer Eberhardt. She basically reframes bias not as some kind of moral failing, but as a mental tool. Our brains create these shortcuts to make sense of a really complicated world, fast. Like confirmation bias? That's our brain taking a shortcut to favor info that already fits what we believe. It's a feature, not a bug. But here's the catch. That mental shortcut becomes a huge problem when we don't even realize it's happening. Or, as a lot of media experts point out, when news outlets don't clearly say, hey, this part is an opinion, they can end up manipulating us by dressing up a biased view and pretending it's an objective fact. And to really get a handle on this, it helps to know that we use the same word, opinion, for totally different things. Thankfully, author Patrick Stokes has a great way of breaking it down for us. Okay, so he points out three categories. First, you've got your simple personal preferences. I like being a vegetarian. Then there are deeply held convictions, often tied to morals or faith. And finally, and this is the important one, there are evidence-based arguments, claims that can actually be tested, like saying beef production impacts the climate. It's only this last one that we can really evaluate for credibility and bias using facts. So that brings us to the main event. This is the core skill we all need: learning to separate what's verifiable from what's personal. It's the ultimate showdown between the objective and the subjective, facts versus feelings. And the difference really is that simple. Objective statements are built on a solid foundation of facts you can check. Subjective statements, they're built on personal feelings, tastes, or what someone thinks. One is about what is, the other is about how we feel about what is. Now look at how this plays out in writing. An objective summary has one job: to inform. It just gives you the facts from the source, using neutral language. But a subjective summary or analysis, its goal is to persuade you, bringing in the writer's own thoughts and judgments, like I think or I found. Let's make it even simpler. Water boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit. That is objective. You can go to a lab, measure it, and prove it. But the frosting on that cake is too sweet, purely subjective. That's just your personal taste, and someone else might think it's perfect. So, how do you actually do this in your own writing or speaking? Well, it really comes down to these pretty simple rules. You use neutral verbs like explains or reports. You always give credit where it's due, attributing ideas to the source. And the big one, you don't inject your own opinion or use loaded words. Your job is to be the reporter, not the judge. Okay, so we're getting pretty good at spotting objectivity out in the wild. Now let's talk about how to create it ourselves. This is all about building your personal toolkit for clear, credible communication. You can think of this as a 4-step recipe for a perfect objective summary. First, you read actively and take notes. Second, you hunt for the single biggest idea and its main supporting points. Third, you write a draft in your own words. This part's key. And finally, you revise, revise, revise. You're like a detective, hunting for hidden opinions and cutting every single word that isn't essential. And just look at the difference this makes in the real world. This example comes from an actual engineering guide. The before version, wow, it's just a long, tangled mess, right? But the after version is so much cleaner. It's shorter, uses simpler language, and gets right to the point. It's not just easier to read, it's way more effective. This whole approach really boils down to what you could call the 3 laws of good report writing. First, always think about your reader. Second, keep it as short as you possibly can. And third, just make sure your writing is accurate, concise, and straightforward. Honestly, these rules are gold for anyone who wants to be understood.
So let's tie this all together. In the crazy, chaotic world we live in, why does mastering this skill of objective communication matter so much? Right here, right now.
Sociologist Zeynep Tufekci gives us a really powerful and kind of sobering answer. The social media platforms we use every single day are not neutral. Their algorithms are literally designed to keep us scrolling, and the easiest way to do that is to make us angry and to feed our existing biases. Think about that. Our brain's own shortcuts are being used to make a profit. So, what's the big takeaway from all this? Well, learning to break down information objectively is first and foremost a defensive skill. It helps protect you from being manipulated. But it's also a creative skill. It teaches you how to build communication that is clear, credible, and worthy of people's trust. We've laid out the tools to help you tell the difference between bias and brilliance, between opinion and evidence. The challenge and the power is now in your hands. In a world full of noise, how are you going to be a voice for clarity?